Welcome to the Post Shift Podcast, your raw look at the hospitality industry, brought to you by SHC. What is happening, Post Shifters? Welcome back to another episode of the Post Shift Podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Shawn Soole. Have I got a doozy for you today? I've got the fantastically lovely Julie Reiner from New York on the live stream today and obviously on the podcast. I have a very long history with Julie, and it goes back to, I think I've told Julie this story once before, but I'm going to tell it again anyway. But 2010, I think 2010, 2010, we were invited to the BNIC Cognac Summit in Cognac, which is where I fell in love with Cognac to start with. And Jeffrey Morgenthaler and I, this is before Jeffrey Morgenthaler was Jeffrey Morgenthaler, we're sitting in the Amsterdam airport at Schiphol, and we're sitting there double fisting an espresso and a Heineken. And we're like, what the fuck are we doing on this trip? Like, there was Julie Reiner, Sash Petreschi, Salvatore Calabrese, Peter Dorelli, Francesca Laferroni, Doug Frost. The list just went on. Alex Cretina. The list just kept going on and on and on. And I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing on this trip. I was 29 years old, a kid from Australia, and getting to hang out with people who I looked up to as much as Julie. And it was just crazy sitting in the lobby of this little 3-star hotel in Cognac where everybody stays when you go to Cognac until the new hotel opened. And just sitting with Julie Reiner and Sash Petreschi and people like that and having a drink. And I'm just like, what am I doing here? So now that I've told that story again, it's still one of my, like, that trip was one of my most favorite trips still to this day. Was one of those trips where I was like, why am I here? Like, why am I here? That trip was just absolutely insane. Good morning, Julie Reiner.
Good morning. That trip was insane. And it was, they really were giving it a college try to get everyone to mix with cognac.
Yeah. They still do. I was in Cognac 2 years ago, and it's still their big mandate to get the cognac back into the everybody drinking it outside of Hennessy, I suppose. I shouldn't say anything bad about the big brands right now. But how have you been? You've had a busy year.
Yeah, I've been great. I mean, our industry just keeps getting busier and busier, it seems. But yeah, I'm good, and lots going on, but all the things that matter are great.
Wonderful. And so let's just do a quick origin story, because I feel like everybody knows where you've come from and what you've done. But for those youngsters who do listen to the podcast who go, yeah, I've heard of Julie Reiner, and what was your origin story? How'd you get into bartending in the industry, and where did we start to end up here?
Yeah, I grew up in Honolulu, Hawaii. So my first job in the bar world was cocktail waitressing in Waikiki, serving pina coladas and blue Hawaiians and Mai Tais to tourists, which was a lot of fun at a very young age. And and then it was like I went to college, and I was like, oh, I can bartend to make money in college. And so I was getting my degree, and I was bartending in college. And then I moved to San Francisco to get a real job, because at that time in the late 90s, my parents were just like, when are you going to get a real job? I was like, so I tried that, and I was bored to tears. And I was just like, you know what? I really like hospitality, and I don't care what you say. I'm going to bartend here too. So that was sort of how I started out, and I never really stuck with the real job. Eventually, I got a job as a bar manager, and then it was acceptable because I had a title.
And you've worked with some absolutely storied stalwarts of the industry, like Dale DeGroff and Audrey Saunders, like the who's who of the New York cocktail scene. You were lucky enough to come up through that beautiful golden age that I started in the industry around about that time when that was really becoming prominent.
Yeah.
How was that back in the day in New York, like when cocktails were starting to become popular? Because I feel like youngsters today sort of are very, no, I wouldn't say spoiled, very lucky to have so much resources, so much attention. You open a cocktail bar, you sort of get attention straight away. Back in those days, like to go push people away from a cocktail that was made at TGI Fridays and actually into proper cocktails was not the easiest thing in the world.
It wasn't, but there was something so beautiful about that time because, so many people have asked me like, what's the pivotal thing in your career? And I always say, I'm like, it was like my timing was perfect. It was just like the right time, the right place, and the right idea because, New York City is a global city where people want the best of everything and they're willing to travel for it. And the food scene here was incredible, but cocktail wise, it was just sort of this bubbling that was happening at that time, and Audrey had worked with Dale, and it was like the Rainbow Room where he really started, and there was sort of like this little seeds of people creating really great drinks using fresh ingredients. I mean, it was like using fresh lime juice was like mind blowing to people at that time, so uh, I just was trying to give people the best thing I could in a glass, and I was at this little cocktail bar in the West Village. And Dale came in because he heard he was at the Manhattan Theater Source next door, and they were like, "Oh, there's this girl. She's making really delicious cocktails next door at the hotel," and he came in and was like, "Hey kid, I hear you're making some good drinks." Yeah, and I was like, "Yeah, you should try my blood orange Cosmo." And he did, and it was just that was sort of my introduction to Audrey and Sasha and Tony Abughanam and some of the other people, Eben Clem, back in that time. It was just like this handful of people that were like, "I like cocktails. Do you like cocktails?" And Audrey would come in, and I was like, "Look at my infusion," But it was. I mean, I think that the thing that was so beautiful about it is that it was just this organic sort of tiny little community at the time, which I have watched just blossom into this massive worldwide situation that I'm overwhelmed by a lot of the time these days. So I can only imagine coming up in it now, and trying to sort of digest the right information must be challenging.
Well, we were talking about it in the green room when we were talking about like 50 best because you were in Vancouver 50 best North America, and congratulations on the Icon Award there. We're going to get into
Thank
that, but
you.
like we were talking about just how insane it is when these sort of like big events come to your city. Because like for Canada, we had 50 best North America in Vancouver, then um, Montreal Cocktail Fest, and then no, Montreal Cocktail Fest was second. In between that, we had Canada's 50 best bars, which is another thing out of Toronto. So in a space of like 3 weeks, we had three massive events, and then of course BCB Brooklyn was just a couple of weeks ago as well. And it's just like
Yeah.
when you have this many people in your town, it gets very overwhelming on how much information and what you can personally do to actually facilitate all your friends coming into town.
Yeah, I mean it's that, and I mean we're booking. Clover has a large space, so we have two private event spaces. And our main room, so we were booked out. By larger brands for two of the nights. We did our anniversary party one of those nights. 17 years, and but yeah, I was just running from Miladies to Clover Club all all week long, trying to show my face at every event that we have because I'm the only one that can do that. Like I can't outsource my own face.
Oh God, you could,
Sometimes I really wish that I could. But yeah, so it was a lot of running back and forth, and it does make it challenging. And it's like I also want to check out BCB and go to some of the seminars and all of that. But when it's in your own city, it's very difficult to actually enjoy the show or whatever it is that's happening there, as well as run your own spots.
So how did you take the Icon Award, the 50 Best Icon Award? How did that feel personally?
I mean, it's always incredible to be, it's first of all, it's a voted on award. So that is really cool. I think that's the best part, that it's voted on by your peers. So, I'm always thrilled to receive these kind of things. Although part of me is like, they just want me to go away.
Well, you can retire now. You've won the Icon Award.
Like,
you can just go. I put my hat up.
Exactly, like Lifetime Achievement Award. I was, even with that, I was like, hey, I'm not old enough to get a Lifetime Achievement Award. I'm not done yet. But but yeah, I mean, it's incredible and humbling, and I'm excited that it's amazing that I have been in this industry as long as I have, and I'm still at it and still enjoying it, and
Well, talking
I
about
might be
that,
a
like
little bit crankier than I was at one point.
a little bit more jaded. A little bit more jaded. More realistic, I'd call
Yes.
it more realistic. I'm more realistic than I was when I was 22 years old.
Yeah, I've seen a lot. So I watch a lot of these things and I'm like, do you really think that's a good idea?
Don't worry, I can make my own decisions. I can make my own mistakes. I'm like, yeah, but I've seen this with 15, 20 different bartenders, and I know that it's a bad mistake. Like, just
Exactly.
statistics, don't do that. So you've opened some of the most influential bars in the world. What do you feel is the secret sauce to building bars that last and shape culture? Like, as you said, Clover Club's 17 years old now, like, and still having that massive amount of relevancy in the industry. What do you think is your special power when it comes to that sort of backbone?
I always strive to open bars that are for the community and for the neighborhood. Like all of our spots have been neighborhood bars, from Flatiron Lounge. I mean, Pegu Club was a little bit less of a neighborhood bar, more of a kind of a global cocktail bar. But the spots that I have been, really the heart and soul of Flatiron Lounge, Milady's, Clover Club, have been really just like spots that are comfy for the neighborhood that also happen to have world renowned cocktails and great bar teams, and we try to offer a really great work environment where people stay with us for a very long time, where we offer a lot of upward mobility, as opposed to some other spots that are out there. And so I think that we've sort of been able to maintain and keep up with what's going on and edit what we do and continue giving the public and the neighborhood a great place to go.
Mm. So when you made that move from bar manager to ownership, because I feel like there's always that natural people see it as natural progression. Like you're a 19-year-old bartender, you're like, okay, well, by the time I'm 30, 32, I'm going to own a bar because that's the natural progression of my life, or become a real estate agent. But
So true.
so true. But when was your moment when you were like, you know what, I'm ready to open a bar, I'm ready to do this myself and cut my own teeth on this thing? What was that transition like for you?
When I was in that bar that Dale DeGroff walked into, uh, you know, again, it was a very pivotal time in New York City where all of a sudden I went from just kind of entertaining the people that were coming into that bar to being on the front page of the food section of the New York Times for the drinks that I was doing, and then New York Magazine, and then they were calling me a cocktail expert, and I realized that it was a completely untapped market, this high-end craft cocktail, giving people something delicious and fresh and intentional in a glass, was not something that places were doing. Like fine dining restaurants, it was like you would go to Le Bernardin and get sour mix on the gun, which is so crazy to think about, but that was true. I saw the hole in the market and I started talking about it. I was like, we should open a bar. And I was talking with some friends, and my friend Michelle Connolly at the time was born and raised in New York City, and her mom owned a bar in the West Village, growing up. And so she had some friends who owned bars. And so we sort of started talking about it. And that was really like the seed was planted. And then I was like, I'm going to open my own bar. This is what I want to do, and I started just talking to people about it and eventually made it happen.
Was there any, like, looking back now, were you naturally business savvy, or was there a couple of moments when you first opened and you were like, fuck, I may have made a mistake, or like, what sort of was that transition of like being a bartender and being fantastically creative and making cocktails, that sort of thing, to being like, oh, I got to look at P&Ls and inventory and costing sheets and stuff now?
Yeah, well, so I mean, lucky for me, my wife, who we moved to New York because she got into NYU for grad school. She was getting her master's in finance and public policy, but she came from bars. So, so when I had the opportunity to open Flatiron Lounge, she was actually working under Rudolph Giuliani, and then she was like, "Fuck this! I'm not going to change the world. I think I want to open this bar with you." And so thankfully, like, she's been a part of every single bar that we're a team. And so the financials have always really been her arena. And the forward facing, dog and pony show and doing all this stuff, and talking to the press and making cocktails and training bartenders, that's always been my side of things. So while, I do sit down and look over P&Ls and understand what's happening with the numbers, I have not had to take the lead on it in the way that a lot of people, because you really can lose your shirt if you don't understand numbers. And so many bartenders don't, because it's not a skill set that somebody like myself, naturally has. I'm always like, take a business course so you understand these things. So that was I was very lucky in that regard. And she's opened all of the bars with me. Now I've lost the rest of the question. What else was there?
Looks, I think I actually saw I think an Instagram post the other day, and you were building the patio at my ladies, I think.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
and you were sitting there having a beer at Clover, and you were sitting down having a beer, and your wife was hammering away putting the patio up.
Well, yeah, no. So the outdoor, she's also very handy. I mean, but again, like, literally at Flatiron, we would call Roto-Rooter to come and like snake the drain, and she would stand behind the guy and be so what are you doing down there, and how does that work? And so she taught herself so many things, because you can spend so much money fixing things in bars. So, she already was incredibly handy, but yeah, so finance and like fixing stuff is those are her big
Yeah.
I mean, she's very smart and skilled at a lot of things, but yeah, I did have a drink there for her as well. And I was holding an umbrella to cover the sun over her while she put up chicken wire so that trash doesn't go underneath our structure outside and make the neighbor mad when the water can't flow through. These are the fun things about bars.
It's one thing I've done over my career as well. Is like, I'd be behind the dishwasher tech, and I'm like, so how do you clean that out, and how do you fix that? He's like, go away. I'm like, and then I never see him again. I'll call him in for a really big problem. He's like, you figured out how to fix the dishwasher? I'm like, oh yeah, I just can't figure out this bit. Can you fix this one for me? And he'll charge me $500 for it. And you go, oh, that's $500 I should have not spent.
Exactly.
You've been lucky enough over the last couple of years to do Drink Masters, the big Netflix show, which it's very cool after seeing so many drinks shows sort of come and go throughout the years, and now the platforms of streaming and stuff, you get to see these sort of cocktail shows. So I feel like cocktail shows on cable television always sort of got a little flack for drinking and so on and so forth. There's like Thirsty Traveler, and Bourdain got a little bit of trouble too, that sort of thing. It really brought cocktail culture into a front of a massive audience. How did that project come together for you, and what do you think about it? What do you think it got right?
Well, so it came about to me during the pandemic, which, previously in my career, I wouldn't even have responded to the email. Anything having to do with reality TV, I was just like, delete. I would never even talk to people about it, because I mean, I came up at a time when, people were like flipping tables over in restaurants and bars, it was like, or the Real Housewives wanted to come in and film at Flatiron Lounge. I was like, no. That's the last thing I want in my bar, but so I was sitting at a table selling people drinks in to-go containers at Clover, thinking to myself, well, if people can't sit next to each other anymore, we're really screwed. So I got the email about the show, and I was like, well, I guess I should at least just have the conversation with them, because again, if this is going to be the future of the world, I'm going to need some way to make an income, you know. So I started talking to them and doing sort of back and forth with the producers, and but the whole time I was sort of like, they're never going to pick me, and I don't really want to know if I want to do it anyway. So I kind of had this like, I don't care if you pick me attitude, which everybody I know who's like an actor has been like, that's why you got it, because you didn't know that you really wanted it. But ultimately, yeah, so they asked me to do it, and you know, and I agreed, and we came to a deal, and I realized that they were hiring people who knew what they were doing. They had really good consultants on the show. And it was a really fantastic experience, honestly, which I was, you know, the things that I was nervous about I was very well taken care of, and you know, it felt really good. Although, you know, there were so many things because we were still somewhat towards the end of COVID and then right before Omicron, there were so many things that we had planned that we couldn't do, you know. So, you know, we're all hoping that we can shoot a season 2, but that has yet to occur. So,
and it got shot in Mississauga, didn't it?
Hamilton.
Because
Yes, they told me Toronto, and I was like, wait a minute. All my Canadian friends are like, Toronto, Hamilton ain't Toronto.
Hamilton, the epicenter of media and filming in Canada. Yeah, because I had a couple of friends, Alex Velez from Vegas. When he got on the show, he's like, "Yeah, I'm going to Hamilton and staying in Hamilton." I'm like, "Why?" And he's like, "I can't really say why I'm staying in Hamilton. I'm just staying in Hamilton." I'm like, "No one chooses to go to Hamilton for a long, like for weeks on end, for any reason other than something weird."
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. It was one of those things where it was like just far enough outside of Toronto that I couldn't really go to Toronto on the days off. But, you know, so it was like, and the whole crew, including Frankie, who was, you know, a co-judge, they all lived in Toronto. So they were commuting up on the day to day. So when we had days off, I didn't have a car, and I wasn't allowed to hang out with the competitors. So we would have days off. So the competitors are running around. I was like, going to a movie, but I had a lot of alone time.
That's fantastic. Did you like at the end of it when it all aired and came out and everything? Were you happy with the result of just how it looked on a professional level? Because some of these times, like you watch some of the Food Network shows and you just like someone can't cook or something like that. It's just a horrific, personally, a horrific affront to our industry sometimes. Did you like the way it sort of looked on a professional level? Because I knew a lot of the competitors, and just the way that they were shown, and it was a really well done on a professional level show where there wasn't any sort of like silly maneuvers or anything like that.
Yeah, no, and it was 100% legit, all of it. You know, I mean, there was, you know, the timing where the three of us are standing watching them in the kitchen work. Like, I there was a lot of it. I was like, I don't know what they're gonna actually keep, because I would talk for hours watching it. Like, you know, it's like we're just like having this banter back and forth that you almost like forget that the cameras are there, because we're just there talking about what's going on for such a long period of time. But yeah, I mean, it was a great experience, and the bartenders were fantastic, and I think everybody really grew and learned a lot. And yeah, I mean, I think if we are able to shoot a season 2, we'll get even more talent. It would be great to have people from globally, you know, on the show. You know, I think so much has changed in the industry, even since we shot the first season, you know, and now that people know what it is, it's always that like season 2 is where you know, I feel like the bar will be raised, so to speak.
So like with Drink Masters and everything, you do a lot of mentorship. What do you feel like is your pillars of being a great mentor to your staff, to the industry? So I know you do world class and that sort of thing. What are your pillars to being a great mentor for the young generation of bartenders?
I mean, you know, first of all, you have to want to be mentored to be to mentor someone, you know. And I have people who work with me who have come to me for advice, or and I just try to always be there for what they need. Sometimes it's not even cocktail related,
Hmm.
um, but yeah, I mean, I've been doing this a long time, and I enjoy watching the next generation of bartenders coming up, and I feel like they have a lot to navigate. I mean, we had different challenges, but there's so much now that I am always just enamored by some of the young people coming up in our industry. So if I can give some tidbits of advice, that's great. I mean, I've also gotten to a point in my career where I'm being mentored by the people who work for me now, in a way. A lot of the new techniques that are happening, and I'm just like, what is that? I mean, like I said before, fresh juice and using tea and an infusion was like mind blowing in the year 2000. But now it's clarification and milk punches and centrifuges and
Methyl,
rotovaps and all of this.
methyl cellulose.
I mean, and I don't necessarily want to subscribe to all of that stuff, but understanding it and why people are using it and what, so it's fun to be at a place now where the mentorship really does kind of go both ways.
Mm. So with your mentorship, you've grown a lot of your team over the years, become really big personalities in their own right, and move on to do their own projects and that sort of thing. How do you foster this talent within your organizations, um, and build these people up, and sort of while still controlling the strength of your business? Like, how do you keep your pillars and your foundations really good in your business while still bringing everybody up, and sort of letting them find their own way if they leave you and move on to another project or something like that?
I mean, well, that is sort of the nature of the business, right? I mean, we try to offer upward mobility. I'll have someone, I actually used this as an example the other day. I was like, Frankie Marshall, who so many people in our industry know, right? She started out as a server at Clover Club, and she was so incredible on the floor. I mean, I never got more people writing comments about this is the best server I've ever had, whatever. But ultimately, she wanted to bartend, so I was like, either I can promote her and put her behind the bar and have her take the next step in her career with me, or she's going to go somewhere
Mm.
else. And while I was bummed to lose her on the floor, she was also a great bartender. I mean, so you have to give people opportunities, and that is one of the ways that we foster talent and keep people within our organization for a long time. I do have, my bar manager at Clover Club, Mauricio Santana, has been with me for 18 years. He
Wow.
started as a bar back at Flatiron Lounge. Then he worked at Lani Kai. Then he came out to Clover Club, became a bartender. Then we promoted him to bar manager, and I've got a few of those. Pedro, who also works at Milady's, has been 16 years, started as a bar back at Flatiron.
That's
Ryan
incredible.
Oloya, who's the head bartender at Clover, has been with us for 12 years. So we definitely have these pillars in our bars who understand what our culture is about and help to pass that down to the next generation of bartenders coming up. I mean, that being said, I've had some people who I've promoted heavily and then lost because I could possibly promoted them too heavily, um, but yeah, I mean, we do just try to help people move in the direction that they want to move in their career. And so it's not only about us and our business. And we're a woman-owned business also. So I think that just the way that we tend to do things maybe is a little bit different.
That's I've been preaching it since the pandemic, because I thought the pandemic was going to be a big reset for our industry, where it was like, okay, we're going to start looking after our staff, because before the pandemic, a lot of venues were turn and burn. Like, if people leave, who cares? Da, da, da. Like, so post pandemic
Yeah.
is like, how do we foster long term guests? And even I've talked to GMs of hotels, and they're like, well, that's hospitality. People just leave. I'm like, but what if they don't? And I still feel like the mentality is still there. It's like if people leave, we replace them. I'm like, the cost of replacing is way more expensive than the cost of keeping and training and
Yep.
mentoring and nurturing is way, way more, like 3 times more expensive. So why would you just not pay for training? Well, it's expensive. I'm like, it's expensive to replace people too.
Yeah, no, training is incredibly expensive. Um, yeah, I mean, it's so true. Turnover is pricey. And you know, you want people who are to stay within your places for a good amount of time. And then when it's really time for them to move on, you know, my hope is that they're not moving on for another lateral bar, you know, move to another
Mm,
bar to be a bartender somewhere else. Unless, of course, it's like I've had people work with us and then go work at another different, very different style of bar because
mm,
they wanted that sort of experience. But oftentimes they'll be still within our spot working with us and another place. But you know, it's like if they leave to open their own bar or they leave to go work for a brand or launch some sort of a product, that's great. That's their next move in our industry.
mm. Has your definition or vision of hospitality changed in the last 20 odd years?
I don't think it's changed that much. No, I think what people wanted 20 years ago is what they want now. You know, I mean, they want to be taken care of. They want to feel like you care. They, you know, I mean, they want an experience. They want something delicious. They want human interaction. And that's something that 25 years ago, today, it's the same.
It's amazing. So you do world class pretty much every year. Yeah, you do world class all over the world.
You know, I did your world class for quite a few years, and then in 2020, 2019 was the last year that I did it. And then I think like a new company kind of came in, and they had some other judges. And then last year I was back as a global judge. But yeah, that was last year was my first year back since
Oh,
2019. Yeah, and it was great. It was so fun to be back in the fold and see what was going on.
are you still surprised when you do competitions like this? Are you still surprised? Obviously, Drinks Masters was a little bit more structured, but when you're judging something like world class globals, are you still surprised by some of the things that bartenders do these days? Like when you've seen a lot and done a lot, like is when do you get goosebumps still and get that tingle down the back of your neck when you see a bartender do something? You're like, damn, that was cool.
Yes, almost even more so now, actually, because I would say, you know, this last year in Singapore, for the first time ever judging world class, I tasted a few drinks that I was like, I don't know how they got to this place. You know, like in the past, I'd be like, oh, okay, so they did this and they infused that and this is this bitters and whatnot, you know. But there were a few drinks that I was just like, this is incredible, and I don't know what this ingredient is. And, you know, I mean, there were techniques that were used that I hadn't used before. So, you know, it's always exciting. I feel like it's like you just getting a front row seat to the best bartenders in the world, which is incredible. It's such an incredible gift. You know, and I was the first female judge that they ever had on world class. So it's nice to see that there are more judges and there are more women involved, and it's a much more balanced judging panel these days.
Yeah, I sometimes find reining in my young bartenders because they'll do this crazy like process and to get a flavor, and I'm like, but you're just making a flavor profile the same as cassis, and they're like, no, I'm not, and you taste it side by side, and you're like, you are. We can just play around with the cassis a little bit. Like sometimes the processes get a little bit intense. For you
Yeah,
on
well, yeah, it's like they want it to sound more interesting on paper
a
because everything's kind of been done. So
yeah,
moving to science and like new processes was kind of like the only place to go to create a new modern classic of some sort. And I get that, you know, but it's true. So often I'm like, what's the difference between this and the strawberry syrup I made? You know? Yeah.
exactly. Um, how do you, on a personal level, stay with so many things going on? Because you've got businesses, you've got your mentorship competitions, obviously, Drinks Masters are coming back, all these things. How do you stay creative personally? Like, how do you stay like focused on that, still that rooted nature of being a bartender at heart?
Well, I mean, travel. and seeing what's happening out there is always really inspiring. I loved going into bars around the world and seeing what people are up to. Um, I recently the newest menu at Milady's is like the first time I have taken really like the lead on a menu in like decades, which was so much fun. I discovered that my general manager who worked with Joaquin Simo for many years, Brooke Toscano is her name. She had a pastry background, and I hired her as a GM, and then I realized she was also a very accomplished bartender and a pastry like chef background, and I was like, this okay. So I bought after visiting Eric Van Beek down at Handshake and getting a tour of all of his fancy toys, I was like, I'm going to buy a centrifuge. I was like, if I'm going to be the new head bartender, I'm going to get a toy. So I bought a centrifuge, and we've been taking, like old drinks of mine from like the late 90s and like giving them the 2025 treatment, which has been
Cool.
super fun. Yeah. So, so that's been inspiring, like sort of taking what's old and making it new again. And, I had spent so much time editing other people's drinks that it was really fun just to work one-on-one with someone to create a core group of drinks for a menu. So
That's very cool.
I'm always inspired by those around me, and our teams are great. And, I have a good time just tasting through all their various thoughts and ideas.
Does the team critique your cocktails when you put a cocktail up? They're like, boss, needs more acid.
Sure, of course. No, well, I mean, yeah, that was actually a very funny thing because so Brooke and I, she's younger than I am, and your palate changes as you get older, and these days all I want to drink are martinis and Negronis, so we would be creating a cocktail for the menu, and the clientele at Milady's is definitely younger, for sure. I mean, I sit there on a Saturday night sometimes at a table and I just laugh because I'm just like, I can't believe we opened this place and there's like a whole bunch of 28-year-olds like doing Jello shots and stuff. But we're working on these drinks, and I was like, I don't know, does this need another like half an ounce of something high proof, and I'm like, or is that just me because I'm now older and I drink martinis? She was like, yeah, that's just you, Julie. That's your old ass palate. But thankfully, I mean, she's just as abrupt and direct as I am, which is good. You need people like that on your team who will be just like, no, this isn't it. Or she'll take something and then she'll take it, and then I come back the next day. She's like, so I thought about this and I made this instead, which is great.
It's a good way to work. What is for the next generation of bartenders? When we talked about mentorship a ton in this episode, what's one piece of advice you'd give the next generation of bartenders coming through the ranks, trying to cut their teeth in the cocktail niche part of the world? What's that piece of advice?
You can't rush it. I feel like there's a lack of wanting to do the work these days. It's like everybody thinks that, it's like they're going to bartend for a year and then they're going to be the head bartender and then they're going to be on the cover of, I don't know, Drinks International as the best, most influential person in the world. But that's not how it goes. I mean, it used to be that you had to like put your time in and do the work, and there certainly are people who have had a bit of a shortcut, but at some point you can tell, so take the time, learn all the things.
The funniest thing is that we actually talked about this in 2010. This is a conversation I remember. Listen, like we were in the lobby of the hotel and you were mentioning bartenders who work at a high a renowned bar after a year and a half becoming consultants. And this was a conversation we had back in 2010 when you were like, they work at Flatiron for a year and a half, then they go off and become consultants. And it's insane that we still have these same conversations 15 years later. But
It's the
it is one
same.
of those things. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the same. It's just different because the digital technology these days makes everything seem like it has to be super quick. And then people
Yeah.
question why am I not a bar manager by the time I'm 25? I'm like, because you don't clean the bar properly at the end of the shift. That's why you're not a bar manager yet.
Exactly.
Like,
Yeah. I
so
mean,
what's
you got to do it.
yeah, you do. Like I started bar backing. I've talked to my team. I'm like, I've worked in nightclubs, I've worked in pubs, like neighborhood joints. I think it's one aspect that does get missed these days is that progression through different aspects of our industry before making it to a fancy cocktail bar. If you only ever work in a fancy
Yeah.
cocktail bar, there's a lot of holes in your service standards, how to cut people off, mise en place, the whole shebang.
Yep. Absolutely. 100% true.
So what's your plan for the next 6 months? We're halfway. I can't believe we're halfway through the year. What's the plan for the
I
next
know.
6 months?
Well, let's see. I mean, Tales of the Cocktail is next. I will be doing a whole bunch of things down in New Orleans for Tales. Um, in August, I'm not looking to work very hard, if I'm being honest. It's like the 1 month that New York City is actually quiet. And so, I'll be taking some time away, spending time with the family. Um, I just am trying to choose the travel and the projects that make sense for me and that serve
Mm,
me, and my bars and my family, because it's very easy to just be on the road all the time and do too much. So yeah, I'm just sort of slowly filling the calendar.
Did you find it hard to find that work-life balance as you progress in your career? Because there is always, like as we were talking, strike while the iron's hot when it comes to these events and pop-ups and everything. Did you find was it tough for you to find that work-life balance and not say yes to everything all the time?
Yes. I feel like half the bars I've opened has been because, like, there's something about New York City is just such a, like, what have you done to get ahead today? It's just a
Mm,
very fast paced, fast moving place. Where I was just, yes, I do want to open this bar, and yes, we should do this, and everything was yes. Um, so yeah, which can be exhausting, and then you turn around and 10 years have gone by, and you're like, what have I been doing?
yeah.
So I really just try to be more intentional these days on the things that I do, and the projects that I'm a part of, and the people that I mentor, and um, just try to make sure that it's an even balance,
Mm.
and it works for me.
I'm starting to make that change myself because my daughter's 15 now, and so it's like all of a sudden you wake up and your daughter's 15 years old, and you're like, "Oh, the last 15 years have been an absolute crazy whirlwind." And I've said yes to
Yeah,
way too much stuff and way too much travel, and travel's great
yeah,
and enriching and stuff, but there's a point where you just got to say, "No, I'm going to do this, this, and this for myself."
exactly. Yeah, my daughter is also 16, so
Mm.
I'm raising a New Yorker. you know, so yeah, it's challenging, but you do have to pick wisely.
So we're at the point of the podcast where I ask 5 deep questions. These are
Ooh.
you. These are the nice deep ones for everybody to sort of get their teeth into. Although the whole podcast is you can get your teeth into that. But what is the one lesson or experience that's helped shape your perspective the most, and how do you carry that forward in your life?
Lesson or experience? I mean, well, so in life, or in this our industry?
In life?
In life, I would say my September 11th experience, because I lived in the closest residential building to the South Tower and was running for my life that morning. And there was very much, my wife and I, like, we left our building and we're looking up and everything's on fire. And, it was, we ran into the back door of the American Stock Exchange as, like, the first tower was falling, and we looked at each other, and she was like, "We're gonna die," and I was like, "Everything's gonna be just fine." And it was like this moment of, first of all, knowing that we're perfect for each other, but the experience coming out of surviving that, and everything that came with the PTSD of it all, was just about understanding just what matters in life and what doesn't matter. Because there's a lot of bullshit to sift through. But at the end of the day, when you're faced with life and death, it changes. So that was definitely a pivotal moment.
I didn't think that my deep podcast questions were going to ever get this deep, but that is the most deep answer I think I've ever got for that question. That was wow. If you could leave one lasting message or piece of wisdom for the world, what would it be and why?
Don't take life so seriously, because you never know, I mean, gotta have a little bit of fun.
Looking back on your journey, what is something you wish you had understood earlier in life?
Oh gosh. Something I wish I had understood earlier. I mean, as far as like opening bars goes, that, choosing your partners wisely.
Yeah, I've gone through that. How do you define success, and has your definition of it changed over time?
I mean, that's a tough one. I mean, success could be a lot of different things. I feel like maybe when I was younger, it would have been more of a financial success. These days, it's just about having a happy life and again, like a work-life balance, and spending time with your family and spending time with my mom, and while she's still here. And, those are the things that are, success in life.
What do you hope your legacy will be, and what steps are you taking to build it?
Oh gosh. I think my legacy is going to be like, it was Julie and the cockroaches of New York City. Like nothing can get her out of that city. No, I mean, I hope that the work that I've done in our industry is remembered as a positive, and that we gave opportunity to all people, and just that our work meant something.
And finally, something a bit lighter to finish it all off. What's your favorite classic cocktail?
I mean, these days it's a martini for sure.
Gin,
2-1
wet,
orange
2-1.
bitters,
Oh,
gin.
nice.
I like to start with the 2-1 with orange bitters, and then I'll move into a 50-50. Just so I can really, make sure to maintain my composure. I'm also fond of Negronis, but I feel like the answer was always Negroni, and then martini has.
There we go.
There we go. The martini has really sort of taken over for me these days.
Lovely. Julie, honestly, it's absolutely such a pleasure always to have a chat to you. Like I still say it a lot, but I'm still that 29-year-old kid who was lucky enough to go on that trip in Cognac and have an opportunity to meet people who at that time, coming from Australia, I'd only ever read about and read an Australian bartender magazine, because it was pretty much before the internet. So you really read about people like yourself, and it's always an absolute pleasure to sit down and have you on the show.
Thank you so much. I love it, and I love your show, and I think you do such a great job. So thanks for having me on.
Thank you, Julie. I'm going to let you go for the day, and I'll chat to you very soon.
Sounds great.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Cheers.
Bye. Thanks for listening, Pose Shifters. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode. I really enjoy sitting down with friends and peers and just chatting about the industry and getting down to the nuts and bolts of what's really going on out there. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, everything on all the platforms. Just hit it up and I'll do my best to answer any queries or questions you have. I'll see you next week, guys. Bye.